Good afternoon. I'm Dara Bunjon. I am the food enthusiast here at J More Living. I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. Let me remind everyone that all past 91 shows, it's been 2 years, are archived at J More Living's Facebook page and J More Living's webpage. So feel free to go back, dig through the archives. There are a lot of great shows in there. Take us for your walks, your runs, and your drives. Today's guest is recently retired Montgomery County Fire Rescue Service Captain since 1982, Pete Corte, who, along with duties of the captain of the team of firefighters, maintains a vibrant 7-year-old Instagram account called The Captain's Kitchen, where day-to-day cooking for his team and now family are documented in photographs. Let me take this opportunity to thank Pete for his service, as well as all firefighters and police who have put their lives on the line to protect us. Good afternoon, Pete. What's on your plate today?
Oh, it's been a busy day already. Hopefully it'll be slowing down from here. But we started out doing a little house hunting today, and the rain's starting to move in. So I think it's going to be a quiet afternoon around the old
Well,
homestead.
well, maybe not so quiet. You got me on the other
Well,
end of
yeah,
this.
we'll see. You know, see how the
You're
afternoon goes.
right. So you're recently retired. Is it just a couple of months? It hasn't been long. How
It
long?
hasn't even really officially been a whole month. It's been technically just since the first of the month, but I had been off for a little bit in between. So, or just prior to that, I'd been off a little bit. So I'm still getting used to the idea of being officially retired.
But
And,
you're
but
still cooking. You're
oh
still
yeah,
cook.
definitely. So the cooking that's still going on. We're doing lots of stuff for the family, and we've got some ideas for doing some type of cooking in a more commercial,
Professional.
professional way.
Right. Okay.
And we're not sure exactly where we're going with that, if it's going to be a catering type, party type service, or if we're going to do a small cafe, limited seating, carry out type place, breakfast, lunch, close it up at 2, something like that. But
You
I'll
had
always
time.
be cooking. I'm definitely a
Yeah.
frustrated baker as well, though, by the way.
Oh, okay. Okay. And
It's the
that brings
worst
me
for
to,
me.
all right. So you did, I'm looking through my notes here. On his Facebook page, he did a unusual, you did an old-fashioned cocktail pie. Do you want to describe that?
Oh, yeah. So a friend of ours here in Augusta uh, had, I guess I should tell everybody, I'm splitting my time right now between Baltimore and Augusta, Georgia. And a friend of ours had a Friendsgiving, and we all volunteered to make something. And I had initially just thought, oh, I'll do a cherry pie. Um, and my friend, Chris, is a big whiskey enthusiast. And I thought, you know what? I will, and my favorite bourbon cocktail is the old fashioned. So I thought that I would take the cherry theme and sort of convert it into an old fashioned cocktail cherry pie. And that's what I came up with. And it really turned out great. Um, and I have to thank my girlfriend Kathy for actually making the dough or the crust. Because, like I said, baking and me don't really go together. But I did come up with a good idea for the filling, and it worked out great. Had a great bourbon flavor. It had orange zest. I steeped the cherries for like 6 hours in the bourbon that I used, and it really turned out great. It was very popular. It did not last long at the party.
No, and I saw that it got huge response on your Instagram account.
Yeah, thank you.
Growing up, it was a toss-up to be either a chef or a fireman. What turned the coin for you into being a firefighter?
I don't really know where exactly the the transition came, or the final decision to go into that vocation, I as early as the early 1970s, as far back as I can remember, I've always wanted to be in the fire department. It's always been something that I thought about, was always attracted to as a child, and it never left my mind, about what I wanted to do. And I know a lot of people thought that was a little crazy, but I definitely also like to cook. I started cooking probably in middle school more consistently. I grew up in the DC area, and my parents both worked. So as I got a little older, I would get dinner going, things like that. My parents would leave out some instruction or whatever, how to cook, whatever, for the night, and so I would do that, and it just sort of. And I enjoyed it. And then when I got in the fire department, and I'd started that in high school as well. Somewhere around the 10th grade, I started, and we had a program in Montgomery County for high school students to participate in the fire service. So I'd go to school like half day, and then you go to the firehouse in the afternoon. And I was always amazed at the amazing lunches that these guys would put together for lunch, middle of the day. Just amazing creations. So food and the fire department and all, and had always sort of gone, they'd kind of gone hand in hand. And I think I was really leaning towards the fire service heavily at the time, even through high school. And then there was I had thought about chef school for a long time, but, I think just the course of events of life kind of put me there. I had gone and I'd worked in some other businesses, and I'd gone away to school for a while at West Virginia University. And actually, my mother died. And I basically, at that time, I made the decision that I wasn't really where I wanted to be at that time. And I decided to commit to the fire service. And it was great. I loved every minute of it. It's really hard getting used to not being there every day and being part of that atmosphere.
Right.
Yeah, the team miss it a lot.
Yeah. What was a typical day like in the firehouse?
So typically, where I worked in, the DC metro area mostly does a 24/48 with a few exceptions. But what we would do is come in, our day officially starts at 7, but everybody would get there a little before 6. We would get our day going. Weekends were always breakfasts, and especially Sunday. And but we get in early, we get our gear checked out for the day, get ready for the day. And then the day at the firehouse officially, like I said, starts at 7. We have a little meeting, we call lineup, and then we go out and do more extensive checkouts on the equipment, make sure everything's ready. Because, honestly, an emergency call could come in at any time. And that's one of the most challenging things about cooking in the fire service is that we never know when that alarm may come in. We could be halfway through whatever meal we're cooking and have to shut it all off and wait hours possibly, or maybe even the next morning before we even come back to the firehouse to see what we had started. So, one of the challenges is, how do you deliver a meal that tastes really good? And how do you deliver a meal in a timely fashion? Really, because even at Thanksgiving, for example, which we would always try and do, or traditional holiday meals were always big at the fire stations. A lot of times we would have families come in, join us for those things. So it's very challenging to do batch cooks in the stations, or even some of the stations. My most recent station I worked at, we only had 4 people assigned there. So cooking for 4 guys is very tough in terms of how do you make a good, nutritious, and delicious meal that everybody wants to pay for. Because guys at the firehouse, notoriously, we want to pay like $6 for dinner. So sometimes it's not easy to cook for a small number of people on a $6 budget. Basically, $24 is very difficult. And even when you have 12 or 13 people in your station, sometimes depending on what we want to cook, it's difficult. So we look for a lot of sales stuff. And some people thought that the money for the meals is given to us. We don't get that. Any meals that we make at the fire station are all out of pocket. A lot of fire stations do what we call a house fund, and we all kick in money every 6 months or every quarter, whatever it is. And it pays for mayonnaise, flour, ketchup, salt, pepper.
The pantry items.
Basically the pantry, yeah. And some stations have better pantries than others. Some don't have any at all. The smaller stations, it's very difficult for them to, the shifts have usually a shift pantry with very small items that are purchased as a group. So it just depends on the station. But meals in the fire service are very important. I know most of the captains and sergeants years ago that I worked for, it was always a question of the day. Hey, where are we? What's for dinner? What's the plan for later? Because really your day seems so long, a 24-hour shift, right? But by the time you do training, by the time you do the apparatus checks, by the time you run the emergency service calls, your day starts getting shorter and shorter.
Yeah. So. Who determines who cooks, and about how many did you cook for at each seating? Now, you said the last place you were was only 4 people, so that was...
Yeah, so probably the most I ever cooked for was 10 to 12, depending if we had like a guest from another station or a chief came in and joined us for dinner or something like that. But it was usually like the past several years had been 4, and then before that, like 3-4 years ago, the 5-6 years before that, I'd been doing a station that had like 11 guys. So it.
So do they say you're really the good cook? You're the one who's good at cleaning?
Yeah, a lot of times. So yeah, so at my old station, I was definitely the guy they would go to for dinner. That was like a constant. Periodically, other guys would check. We had other guys who cook at that station too. Really great guys, like really knew how to throw down some amazing food. And fire stations notoriously have some really awesome cooks out there. And I know a lot of them out there that are hopefully watching. I don't know, that do a great job. And we have guys that can do some amazing things with very few ingredients, which is important. And so some days it's the go-to guys always cooking, and sometimes we just throw it out there. And I always like to ask other guys, hey, you want to cook this week, or you want to cook this shift or today? Because periodically everybody on my shift would cook a meal.
Right, so the ones that didn't cook, I clean up, I guess.
That's exactly how it works. If you don't cook, you clean. So, right. And then even if you cook, you clean too sometimes.
Right,
so
well.
It's just, you just pitch in.
Right.
And you do what you can, because it's a team, so.
Is there one dish that was requested most from you by the other teammates, saying, why don't you make this?
So chicken marsala was always popular. Somebody told me one time that was the first time I made it for them. That was the first time that they had ever had pasta in a firehouse that wasn't all stuck together. So I was, and that is kind of funny because, as I thought back over the years, that's very true. That does happen frequently. But, again, it's a challenge to cook at busy fire stations, and even sometimes slow ones, because
you don't know when the call's
you just don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
But so chicken masala was always popular. One chief liked my Cincinnati style chili a lot, and had encouraged me to make that a few times. And so when the boss is asking, you usually just do what the boss asks. So, and it was always fun.
Is there any special secret behind your chicken marsala that you're willing to share?
I don't think that there's any real secret to it. It's just pretty straightforward recipe. It just mushrooms and shallots and wine and a little bit of love. You got to throw that love in there. That's why the pasta doesn't stick together. It's because of the love.
That's right. And possibly boiling water and enough of it.
Yeah, that's true too.
Right. There's such a mystique. We see, there's been fireman cookbooks and firemen that were on Chop TV, and
right.
Fireman Calendar has nothing to do with food, but it's hot. Okay.
Maybe somebody else is in it. I'm too old for that.
Yeah.
It'd have to be the old guys of old guy fire department calendar.
Engine 55, something like that.
Yeah.
Now, you didn't get enough smoke being a fire captain, but you tend to like smoking foods.
Yeah, I do.
Pie. You have a smoker.
Yeah, we do.
So you didn't get enough on the job.
No, you can never get enough smoke. So, but I guess the trick is to get enough smoke, but not make you or it bitter. It being the food. So.
Right. Let me give you some choices here, and you can tell me which you would pick.
Okay.
If you had your choice between beer, whiskey, brandy, bourbon, tequila, cocktails, water, mocktails, which one would you take?
Afternoon, we're going to go with bourbon. I brought some with me.
Okay. All right.
I do like a bourbon cocktail.
Okay. Steak, fish, pasta, pork, chicken, turkey.
Steak followed or paired with a little bit of seafood is always a winner.
Okay. Now, I know your heritage is Italian.
Yes.
But Italian, Asian, Mexican, regional American, French, Middle Eastern, Indian.
Yes.
Yes to all of them?
Oh, yeah. I love a lot of variation of foods. Certainly, I love Italian food. I really, and interestingly enough, this brings me to a story that I wanted to mention. When I started in the fire service, they're like, "Hey, who can cook here?" And I was like, "I can cook." And they're like, "All right, well, you cook dinner." And I had recently eaten for the first time. I mean, this is in the early '90s at a Thai restaurant, and I really loved it. And I think it was probably my first exposure to Thai food. And I had Thai basil chicken and a chicken satay, but it had been a while, and I couldn't quite remember exactly what I had had. So I sort of combined the two and made a satay basil Thai chicken for the Firehouse, and they loved it. And it really tasted good. I mean, it wasn't any way traditional, but it turned out really good. And from then on, I was basically, "Hey, you're cooking, right?" And I was the new guy, so the answer was yes, and happily. And and then one guy at another station said, "Hey, I heard you're some kind of gourmet chef or something." And I was like, "Well, far from that." But it did kind of inspire me to search out and learn the techniques of the difference between a satay chicken or chicken satay and Thai basil chicken, for example, and the nuances to different cooking. So I have been able to imitate recipes that I've had out as much as anyone could. And I mean, I'm talking about pre-Google age. So yeah. I always kind of tried to copy what I had out if that worked. I used to use a lot more cookbooks than I do now. And I do try to just come up with what we have on hand, because frequently in the Firehouse, especially, cooking on what you have on hand is important, because one, you can like transform the leftovers into something awesome, or depending on what's in the pantry, you can add to what you buy and make something amazing. So always trying to, like I said earlier, making a meal that tastes like you put 2 days into it and you only really have a few hours sometimes, or it's interrupted, or it's, somehow it takes a little bit of flexibility, for sure.
Yeah. I was just listening to a podcast on Milk Street and David Chang at Momofuku restaurants. And he had worked at David Boulet's restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And people know when they go out to dine, white linen tablecloths, that you usually get an amuse-bouche, a kiss for your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought out that the amuse-bouche was nothing special. They were tasked with creating an amuse-bouche out of whatever scraps they had from other things that they were making.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same concept of you don't waste anything,
Right.
and secondly, you're honoring the food or the animal by not wasting anything.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
It's so important. I mean, I hate, like, every once in a while you get that travel schedule or whatever, and you come back and you realize you forgot, like, whatever produce in the bottom bin, right? I hate that. I freeze so many things for use later, and it's really paid off. And, just general savings. But I've turned some of that stuff into some really delicious meals at home. And then we had something that they used to call, also early in my fire service career, I was exposed while visiting the Detroit Fire Department to refrigerator stew. And it's been in my repertoire ever since. I love making it. It's basically whatever's on hand, you throw it all in, season it up, and it's really good on a damp winter day.
Yeah. Any other special tricks, culinary tricks or trucs that you, as they say, that you care to share? That you had that oh my God moment going. That's a great thought. Great way to do that.
Well, I've definitely I can't think of a specific one, unfortunately, but I've definitely come up with some pretty decent no-name dishes just on the fly out of what we've had. And I think that one thing that I've had to learn is going from batch cooking to smaller portion cooking is a huge challenge, because when you're used to doing like hotel pans versus just regular household size, it's a huge, and you got to like get your seasoning down and that kind of thing. But in terms of a specific trick, I don't have too many tricks other than just, I don't know, a lot of people ask me for recipes, and I don't really have them because I don't use them. I never really have. It's like, I mean, unless you're baking or something, which I'm not a huge baker, but try to, I just don't use recipes. So that's just, it's hard. Like, a lot of it is just eyeing the apportionment and, tasting how it comes out. I don't have a lot of written down recipes yet.
Well, I think as you start out, you go by recipes, and recipes are supposed to be a guideline.
Right.
And if you're a novice cook, then yes, you follow it to the T. But as you learn to cook, you learn that maybe you don't like as much salt as other people, or maybe you like pepper in something, or the portion, and maybe you don't have extra virgin olive oil, maybe you just use canola oil. For whatever reason, things you can adapt. Biggest epic culinary fail?
So definitely didn't have a name, but I had kind of followed a recipe, actually, oddly enough, on what I just said. But I was trying to like find meals that were healthier, for example, lower carb, this, that, uh, complex carb delivery. And I did this one pot meal, and I don't know, I got it all thrown together and I tasted it and I was like, it's okay. And I'm going to tell you, I made it for my family. Epic fail. My kids were like, Dad, what the heck is this? So it just, never again. I think I'll just stick with my own no recipe cooking and do that. But yeah, I think that meal that I made them that night was probably the worst thing I ever made. And it
Okay.
didn't even look pretty.
3 children, 2 boys, 1
Yes.
girl. Any of them
Yes.
leaning towards Firehouse or leaning towards cooking?
No, I don't think so. Matt is going towards engineering. Claire is looking at law school, and Nick is looking into the trades. So I'm not sure if he's going to be an electrician or a plumber yet. He hasn't decided, but who knows? He could decide to go to college next year after all, and go be a doctor. I don't know. He's only just turned 18, so
There's time. There's
yeah,
time.
he's
I
got lots
wasn't
of
quite
time. There's
ready.
no
Yeah.
rush. Yeah.
Best or worst piece of advice given to you, or best piece of advice or worst piece of advice you've given to someone else?
I guess the best piece of advice, that I guess I followed and that I've tried to pass to my kids is follow your passion. Follow what you want to do with your life. If that includes going to college and getting a degree in something, whatever, or going and becoming a plumber, whatever you want to do, that's your passion, that is your calling. I picked my vocation mainly because it was always there. There was never a time in my life where I didn't think about the fire department as early as I can remember. I even have a picture on my Instagram somewhere of me 1972 in full fire protective equipment that a friend of my mom's had let me put on. So I think is follow your passion, whatever that
Right.
is, and it'll take you wherever you ever dreamed of.
If you were approached to go on Chopped when they did the fireman show, would you go?
Oh, I would definitely jump on going on that. Yeah, for sure. So I would
Okay.
definitely try it. It would have to be
Okay.
Chopped retired guys though.
Well, who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, you never know.
I hear from the girl that does the casting. So if anything comes up again
Oh,
for
okay, that would be
firemen, I
awesome.
will let you know. Um, we talked the other day about brisket.
Yes.
Yes. And we talked about the Jewish brisket and then there's smoked brisket. What is your favorite way to prepare a brisket? And is it the full brisket or is it the first cut?
So if I had my choice, I would do the full packer cook and do the smoked. But I think my favorite meal growing up is my friend's mom made the flat, and she roasted it in the oven. It was so good. I mean, it was phenomenal. And but we have our smoker right back there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you
It's
can
so
see that back
teeny on
there.
my screen. Yeah, I
Yeah,
see
it's
it.
small,
I
but it's
see it.
actually pretty big.
Yeah.
That's our pellet smoker. I know it's not wood fired smoking there, Chris, but it does a great
Well,
job, and I really enjoy cooking on it. It makes amazing chicken.
well,
So, but brisket,
uh,
yeah, I would have to say the 18-hour long version.
yeah. Um, I just want to remind people to go check out on Instagram the Captain's Table, Pete
The
Corte,
Captain's Kitchen.
Captain's Kitchen. I keep doing that, don't I?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think I threw you off the other day because I talked about, you know, all of those meals, whether they're at home or if they're at the firehouse or wherever.
You know what? I
You
have it
bring
typed up
everybody to the
here.
table, you know?
Yeah. It's the
So,
captain's kitchen, everyone.
yeah.
I have it typed two different ways on my notes. It's just whatever. And to give you an idea, here is like his last post and his description. Taco Tuesday at the captain's kitchen was straight with, I think, straight out of my heart or whatever. We had an emoji with my homegrown and home pickled jalapenos. The chicken was slow cooked in dried guajillo, mauricio, pasilla peppers, and onions with chicken broth. Tacos are topped with cilantro, cotija cheese, red onions, and super hot whole pickled jalapenos. Mouth-watering. They looked fabulous.
Thank you.
Absolutely terrific. And my last question is, what haven't I asked you that I should have?
I don't know. I think we covered pretty much everything. I just really want to thank you for the opportunity to come on and talk to everybody about my life and, you know, my story at the fire department and how I merged basically my two passions in life over the last 30 years. And, you know, all of those, I think getting back to that captain's table concept, my earliest memories of the fire service in high school were coming in at lunchtime basically, and all the guys sitting around the table and having lunch and talking about what's going on, catching up, cutting up, doing those kinds of things.
Right.
And I think that, you know, a lot of what I cook today and how I cook today are inspired by some of those things that I saw guys cook in the 80s at the firehouse. Now, some of them definitely aren't on the healthy side, but one of the epic cooks from back in the day was a hot dog with bacon and Velveeta cheese. And that was lunch. And then the other guy, I'm pretty sure it was the same shift. This guy had humongous hands, okay? And he would make these burgers that were like softballs. And me and my buddy Peter Dugan came up recently at my previous assignment at Station 32 with something we called the bear paw, which we were going to make smash burgers, but we came up with a single burger that was as big as my hand from here to here and as wide, and he named it the bear paw. So that's back in the Instagram pages somewhere too, and over on Facebook. But the bear paw, all of those things are memories of really good times in the fire station. And just like the folks at home, you know, the memories that are shared around their tables and around their kitchens cooking, you know, I think that that is the inspiration for what I do in my cooking. And, you know, as I pursue cooking and things like that. But that's, I think, where that inspiration really came from. You know, even my earliest Thanksgiving memories at my parents' or weekend meals, whatever it was, you know.
It's love.
Yeah, and I always used to get my kids used to say, "Hey, Dad, what makes this so good?" And I said, "It's a secret ingredient. It's in there." Oh, what's that? What's that? I'm like, "It's love. It's love." So
I
yeah,
agree with you. To me, my passion, my love of food came from knowing that my mother had a rule of thumb. We all sat down to dinner. There was no newspaper, there was no TV, and we talked about our day, however inane it was from a third grade
hmm
student talking about their day.
right.
That sense of family and feeling of love ties in with my passion for food. I want to thank you. I want to wish you the best of the holiday season and good luck on finding your new home. And we will
Thank you.
miss you in Maryland. I know you'll float back and forth, but we'll keep your eyes open for the captain's kitchen.
Oh, for sure.
And
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I'm just going to go on with some notes. So she'll
Okay.
fade you out a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, everyone. No show next week because it's the holiday. December 30th, Bryce Taylor, who is a junior chop contestant who is now in college, will be talking about his trip from the show and how, as a teenager growing up, he adapted and became a personality here in the area. Uh, Best wishes to those who are celebrating Christmas and Kwanzaa for an outstanding holiday. As always, you can find me on my social at Dara Cooks. You can email me at food@jmoreliving.com. The show will be up on J More Living's Facebook page as well as their website. I thank you for watching the show. At least it's been 2 years now, and for sharing the show with friends and family, which helps the show grow our audience over the past 2 years. And it's greatly appreciated. And as I always end, may your plates always, always remain full. Thank you for joining us.